So tonight brings us again in the book of Judges, and in the story of Samson is where we are. We will finish the main line of the narrative in the book, as after the story of Samson, there are two stories that aren't so much in chronological order, two standalone stories of evil. Uh, and so we sort of finish out the book of Judges on a down note, because Samson isn't a particularly encouraging story in a lot of ways. And then the two stories to follow are worse yet. But then we'll study the book of Ruth, where we find another story set alongside and contemporaneous with the things in the book of Judges, in which actually we have people living right. We have people concerned for one another and concerned for the law of God. And they are greatly blessed, and it's a great encouraging story. So we'll study Ruth after Judges. So we think about what's said over and over, and it starts again tonight as we're in chapter 13. This same saying that's in chapter 2, twice in chapter 3, in chapter 4, in chapter 6, in chapter 10, chapter 13, where we start verse 1, also starts, "Then the sons of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord." So that's sort of our recurring theme, that they did evil in the sight of the Lord. And in those two appendixes, or those two add-on stories of great evil in the book of Judges, we have the additional note, "In those days there was no king in Israel, and every man did what was right in his own eyes." And so that's what comes when everybody does what's right in their own eyes. Again, those who are bound by conscience and with regard to one another and to the law. In the book of Ruth, we see a whole different story and a whole different tenor, a whole different outlook, where there's a faithful kinsman redeemer who helps out those who are in trouble. Now, we're going to, as we go through this, we're going to be a little hard at times on Samson. I've heard some, and it's hard to object, when they just say Samson was stupid, or here were the faults of Samson, and they'll lay them out. But at the same time, we want to restrain ourselves a bit in our judgment. For one, if someone was to examine our lives in such a way that they might come to some same conclusions about us, which we would find uncharitable. But even more so, this from Hebrews 13, about that fellow we studied last week, Jephthah and Samson. The Hebrew writer says this, "And what more shall we say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets." So listed in Hebrews 11 among the faithful are Gideon, who we found, again, flaws with, especially in his rule, after his deliverance of the people. Barak, who didn't clothe himself with glory either entirely. Samson, the one we're going to study, with his we'll just say foibles for now. Jephthah, with the cruelty that he reigned with in his rash vow. But those guys are listed along with David and Samuel and the prophets. And the Hebrew writer says, "Who by faith," and then lists a number of things people did by faith, "conquered kingdoms, performed acts of righteousness, obtained the promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, from weakness were made strong, became mighty in war, and put foreign armies to flight." Well, our judges certainly did those last two. We became mighty in war and put armies to flight. And the rest of that list, we can identify some of those as Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and some others. But we do note that they are listed with the faithful, so we'll temper maybe some of our critique and leave them there among the faithful. Now, to start with, when we go to the story of Samson, I just want you to go back to those thrilling days of yesteryear and think about this Bible story here. Oh, you know what? I grabbed the wrong background. And so let me try this again with inserting the proper background into our document here. Here we go. Let's try this again. All right, so this is the Bible story then that I would like for you to consider. At a time when Israel was groaning under oppression, and an angel appeared to the mother and father to be and announced that the special son was coming, the son who would be the Savior of Israel, the son upon whom the Spirit of the Lord would come and grant him the ability to do great things. So the Spirit of the Lord would come upon our hero. He's a man who liked to speak in riddles, and he confounded the enemies of God and the rebellious by the things that he said, that he had authority to judge Israel, that he was at a very eventful and famous wedding, and that our hero was bound and mocked and turned over to the oppressors. And then he died a willing death, pulling down strongholds. And of course we go, yeah, I know that story. That's the Christmas story. That's Jesus. And we say, well, you know what? That's also Samson. It's amazing the parallels. And we've not stretched these, I don't think, very far at all. We have kind of spoken about them briefly in veiled language so that the way we describe it covers both Jesus and Samson. But there's a connection of the story of Jesus and the story of Samson that is absolutely undeniable and is obviously intentional. That this man is, in so many ways, a Jesus-like figure, but kind of an anti-Jesus figure, an opposite of Jesus figure. I use the word anti-Jesus so that we don't confuse at all what I'm saying with the word antichrist, because, you know, when we talk about antichrist, we're talking about against Christ and contrary to Christ and heresy and oppression and evil on the part of those who are antichrist. When I say anti-Jesus, I mean kind of the dark, twisted version of Jesus, of the story of Jesus. But, well, when I was a kid, I was a big fan of Rocky and Bullwinkle show. And if you all know to remember that, they had a thing called fractured fairy tales, where they told the fairy tales wrong. They told the fairy tales from an odd point of view, or where things didn't quite work out in the way that you're used to. And this is kind of the fractured fairy tale version of the story of Jesus. And I hesitate a little bit even to use that reference, because whenever we say fairy tale regard to Bible stories, we're worried that maybe folks will think we're like the unbelievers who don't believe in the veracity of Scripture, the inspiration of Scripture, the truthfulness of Scripture. We certainly believe that. No, we're just saying that these things are quite different here in the story of Jesus, that things are kind of set a bit sideways to the story of Jesus, or maybe for a more modern reference, the Black Mirror version of Jesus. I'm not familiar with that show. I don't know if I suggest all the episodes, but some of them are pretty good. And it's sort of a modern take on the Twilight Zone. Yeah, so maybe, again, it's an old reference. The story of Samson is the Twilight Zone version of the story of Jesus. Okay, so as we go now to the text, we start in chapter 13 with, again, the common refrain, the sons of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord, so that the Lord gave them over to the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Well, the judges, obviously, there's a time span of the judges where if we add up all the judges, it's a little too long. And that's because there were different judges in different places, and their reign and the times came about of them, they overlap some. So what was happening down in this part wasn't happening up in that part. And this gives us the area of the Philistines. Well, of course, we think about the early kingdom of Israel right after the judges with David and Saul, and how big a deal are the Philistines? Well, here the Philistines are a troubling of the people of God here on the southwest corner of the land of Israel, in modern day, that would be Gaza and maybe the area just north of there as well, along that coast. All right, so for 40 years now, there's oppression in that area because the people did evil. Now, verse 2, here comes our first actors. There was a certain man of Zorah of the family of the Danites. Now, we're going to run into them later. Most of them had decamped for the north and gone up to the north to try and find some land. But this one man of Dan is still down in the south. And his name was Manoah. And his wife was barren and had no children. Well, how many times is that the beginning of a Bible story? And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, now you are barren and have no children. You shall conceive and give birth to a son. Well, there's several different texts. If we just read that part, we say, okay, which Bible story is that? It might be the story of John the Baptist. It might be the story of Isaac. It might be the story of Samuel. There's several places where that might come along. And so you though, are going to conceive and be given a son. Verse 4, now therefore be careful. So be careful, and we're going to have more of that as well. We'll just go ahead and put it up. In the next verses about pay attention. So go pay attention to our instructions here with what's going on with this son. So therefore be careful not to eat not to drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing. For behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son. No razor shall be upon his head, for the boy will be a Nazarite to God from the womb, which is exactly the circumstance of John the Baptist, the great prophet. And he shall begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines. So he will begin the deliverance. So he accomplished what God wanted, the beginning of the deliverance. The Philistines were raised up again to trouble Israel in the time of Saul, and David is the one, and we think particularly of David and Goliath. David is the one who will ultimately, when he becomes king, deliver the people from this enemy. But the beginning of the deliverance is back here with Samson, announced from before his birth. Then the woman, verse 6, came and told her husband, a man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of an angel of God. Very awesome. And I did not ask him where he came, nor did he tell me his name. But she says, look, he was an angel. I wasn't asking. But he said, behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son. And now you shall not drink wine or strong drink or eat any unclean thing. For the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death. So she got the gist of it and told her husband. Well, the husband, kind of like John the Baptist's father, it's so remarkable that Joseph, in the story of Jesus, he takes the news of the forthcoming birth of this his son from God, and the fact that his wife will be the one to give conception. Miraculously, Joseph takes that without complaint. And Joseph takes that with no recorded hesitation, with no recorded doubt, unlike these other fellas. And so here's one of these other fellas. Manoah entreated the Lord and said, O Lord, please let the man of God whom you have sent to us come again, that he may teach us what to do for the boy who is to be born. Well, his wife done told him, but he asked for God for a confirmation. And so here is God condescending. Here's God merciful. Here's God giving more than is necessary. And we think, how often does God do that for us? So God listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came again to the woman as she was sitting in the field. But Manoah, her husband, was not with her. So the woman ran quickly and told her husband, Behold, the man who came the other day has appeared to me. Then Manoah arose and followed his wife. And when he came to the man, he said to him, Are you the man who spoke to the woman? And he said, I am. And Manoah said, Now when your words come to pass, what shall the boy's mode of life be, and what is his vocation? And the angel said to Manoah, Let the woman pay attention. So I'm going to tell her, and she can pay attention and she'll know. She should not eat anything that comes from the vine, nor drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing. Let her observe all that I have commanded. So, third time, here it is. No different this time than before, but just go ahead and pay attention because God has said. And so then Manoah seems to need a sign. Well, what we just studied about the unbelievers in our study recently on Sunday morning, 1 Corinthians, right? The Jews seek a sign. Jesus said this evil and adulterous generation is always seeking a sign. Well, here is a sign of a lack of trust, but again, the condescension and the mercy of God to give the sign. So then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, verse 15, please let us detain you so that we may prepare a young goat for you. So let us give you a meal or an offering. And he says, well, though you detain me, verse 16, I will not eat your food, but if you prepare a burnt offering, then offer it to the Lord. So don't give me anything, give a sacrifice to God. For Manoah did not know that he was an angel of the Lord. Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, what is your name? So that when your words come to pass, we may honor you. And the angel of the Lord said to him, why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful? That's interesting. You don't need to know my name. Basically, it's too much for you to even know. But you do not need to know my name. You need to know what God said. And I've done told you several times what God has said. So Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord. And he performed wonders while Manoah and his wife looked on. Wouldn't you like to have been a fly on the wall for that? An angel does wonders while they are preparing the sacrifice. We've had a number of wonders in the book of Judges, I guess most famously Gideon and the fleece, when it was wet and then it was dry. But here, this angel does miracles, does wonders as they looked on. For it came about when the flame went up from the altar toward heaven, that the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar. That would certainly be one of the wonders, I'm sure. And when Manoah and his wife saw this, they fell on their faces on the ground. So they had no idea what they were messing with. They had no idea who they weren't being quite as respectful as they should have been. And isn't that true about things related to God so very many times? We don't even know what we're doing. And so the angel of the Lord did not appear to Manoah or his wife again. Then Manoah knew that it was an angel of the Lord. And so the offering is consumed. The angel ascends with the fire. And it's like, oh, that was an angel. Yeah. Okay. So Manoah says to his wife, again, some of these problems that Samson has, he comes by them honestly. Manoah says to his wife, we will surely die, for we have seen God. Well, you saw the angel of the Lord. You did see the personal representative of God. You saw as much of God as anybody ever saw before Jesus came in the flesh and showed us God. But no, you didn't see God himself. And so the wife said to him, if the Lord had desired to kill us, she's the logical thinker here, not him. If the Lord had desired to kill us, he would not have accepted the burnt offering and the grain offering from our hands, nor would he have shown us all these things, nor would he have let us hear the things like this at this time. And so if his intention was to kill us, he wouldn't have told us about the son we're going to have. I kind of hope that she slapped him a little bit on the back of the head when she said that. I'm not sure that she did. I bet she didn't. But wouldn't it have been nice to see? But I'm sure she was more respectful to her husband, even here, than that. Okay, so they sorted out, at least she sorts it out, that God has a plan here. God is doing something and will do what God says. So the woman gave birth to a son and named him Samson. And the child grew up, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him in Manadan between Zorah and Eshtaol. Okay, so he grows up, and the Spirit of the Lord is upon him. The Spirit of the Lord stirs him, and he is now going to start doing his work among the people of Israel down there in the area of the Philistines. And so now comes the wedding. Now comes the eventful wedding. And, we think about Jesus at the wedding, and because of what Jesus does, it was socially awkward. When they ran out of wine, it was a terrible thing. Jesus cured that and gave generously, with the wonderful gift of the much wine. Here, it's socially awkward too. But instead of providing what's lacking and being calming and soothing and uplifting, well, with Samson, it was God's intention for him to be a provocation to the Philistines. And so this wedding is going to be a provocation, and it's going to set in motion the events of the rest of Samson's life, in which it's just a greater and greater irritation and conflagration, really literally that word for part of it, conflict and death. And so instead of, like Jesus, the wedding being a sign of an abundant life, this wedding will be a prelude to a lot of death. So then Samson, chapter 14, then Samson went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines. So here was a place about 3 miles from the village that he lived in. So it's neighboring village, but a village of the Philistines. And of course, we think about the Canaanites that God said in Deuteronomy, do not intermarry among those tribes, even though in that Deuteronomy 7, the Philistines aren't particularly listed out as one of the 7 forbidden tribes. They are Canaanites and called Canaanites, and so they're under the general instruction of not to intermarry. But here God is using this again, this connection that they start with, to be a case of provocation. So verse 2, he came back and he told his father and mother, I saw a woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me as a wife. And his father and his mother said to him, is there no woman among the daughters of your relatives or among our people? So we're the tribe of Dan. Is there nobody from the tribe of Dan? Or is there nobody in Israel? Is there no woman of Israel or of Dan in particular that you'd like? Because we'd really prefer that you do that. This is probably the most sensible thing that we find his father engaged in, and certainly a sensible thing by his mother too. And so Samson says, nope, get her for me, or she looks good to me. Well, that's been the basis of a lot of people making a marriage. She looks good to him. And, well, we know how some of those turn out. We hope that she is good to him. Honestly, in this case, the girl doesn't really have a chance to prove that either way. But this is the first the real indication we see from Samson's mouth of some of the issues that are plague him, that he just seems to not be as spiritually minded as we hope a judge of Israel would be. Now, again, we know that God raised him and placed him and in this for the cause that he did, for God to work against the Philistines. And so God uses Samson for this, and he sure seems to be a willing participant in going along in it. So his father and mother, verse 4, did not know it was of the Lord. And so this was the cause of the Lord. Whether the Lord set it up and it was a righteous thing from the start, or whether it was an unrighteous thing that God said, I can use that, we know that God does both. But it was of the Lord, for he was seeking an occasion against the Philistines. Well, we're going to get it. We are going to get the occasion. And Samson, through his life and through his body, is going to pay the price for this, but he will do the Lord's will. And again, from the Hebrew writer, the summary of his life is he worked in faith. So we'll take it at that. Now, at that time, the Philistines were ruling over Israel. All right, so the marriage to provoke, and then chapter 14:5, now honey from the lion. Then Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother, and they came as far as the vineyards of Timnah. And behold, a young lion came roaring toward him. Okay, well, that's never fun. I hope I don't have any of that when I'm traveling next week. Lions jumping out of the bushes. But here, the Spirit of the Lord came on him mightily. And so this is a phrase that will recur in the life of Samson on several times. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him. Well, for Jesus, famously, the most famous one to have that phrase about him, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him to preach the gospel. Here, the Spirit of the Lord comes upon Samson to do mighty feats. And so he grabs the young lion, or grabs there. He tore him as one tears a young goat, though he had nothing in his hands. Well, I'm not sure how you dismember a goat barehanded, but it certainly, I guess, would be easier than a lion. I take it to be the way that you rip the meat off the bone after the goat's been cooked. But in any case, this lion, with all the strength of a lion, cannot at all stand up against Samson. And so he just rips the thing apart with his bare hands. But he did not tell his father or mother what he had done. Man, I'd be telling everybody, right? I would have commemorative patches made. I would have that all over my Instagram. I'd probably set up an Instagram account just to do that. But in case he keeps it secret. We wondered what else he might have done as well with the powers that he had of God. In any case, he keeps it quiet. And they went down and talked to the woman, and she looked good to Samson. Again, she looked good from afar, I guess, and now she looks good up close. So the courting went well. And when he returned later to take her, he turned aside to look at the carcass of the lion, and behold, a swarm of bees and honey was in the body of the lion. So a hive of bees had set up shop, and there is now a honeycomb in the body of the dismembered lion. So he scraped the honey into his hands and went on eating as he went. Okay. Again, just weird to me. I guess maybe the lion by then was kind of desiccated. So I guess. Anyway, good honey. No sense of wasting it just because it came out of a lion. So he scraped the honey into his hands and went on eating as he went. And when he came to his father and mother, he gave them some and they ate it. But he did not tell them that he scraped the honey out of the body of a lion. I guess not. I mean, how do you tell people that? Hey, I got some lion carcass honey here. Good brand, lion carcass honey. In any case, the honey is shared. The thing that is going to be the riddle has been established. And so again, God using this as a provocation. And you just think about the odd things that God can use for his purpose when he desires, and things that we would never come to, wouldn't be our way to do it, but such is the ways of God. So verse 10, we have now at the wedding a riddle, we have a wager, and with that we have some terrible strife. Then his father went down to the woman, and Samson made a feast there, for the young men customarily did this. And when they saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. All right, so we got a big crowd. We got 30 fellas. They're from the town. It seems we got Philistines showing up to enjoy the feasting and the things. And so Samson says to them, now let me propound a riddle to you. If you will indeed tell me within 7 days of the feast and find out, I will give you 30 linen wraps and 30 changes of clothes. So if y'all fellas can solve this, I'll give all of y'all a change of clothes and a linen wrap, the outer garment. And so that's, I don't want to buy clothes for 30 people. Well, I have a wedding coming up next week. And last month I took one of my sons shopping and helped him get clothes for the occasion. And I just had to get clothes for one. He's a big one, but still just one. Samson here is going to provide as the bet, as the wager, 30 changes of clothes. And it probably was more costly back in those days than it is now. And so this is a large scale wager. But if you're unable to tell me, then you will give me 30 linen wraps and 30 changes of clothes. So they'll all have to provide him one of the 30 of them, and he'll provide all 30 of them if he wins. And I say, all right, we like those odds. And we got 30 of us to solve it. So propound your riddle that we can hear it. Again, it's a provocation being set up by God. Their greed, and maybe Samson's desire as well to pull one over on them, or maybe some desire of him for financial gain is also part of this. But here we've got a whole bunch of young fellas, 30 of them on one side and one on the other, and they've all got now a financial stake in this riddle. And again, meant to be a provocation, and certainly accomplishes that. So he said to them, out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong one came something sweet. And so, of course, we know the story of the lion and the honey, but who ever heard of such a thing? We didn't until we read it, and they hadn't either. And so 30 fellas for 3 days, they haven't got it solved. Then it came about on the fourth day that they said to Samson's wife, entice your husband so that he will tell us the riddle. Well, this is a pattern, of course, we know from later Samson and Delilah. Get to Samson through the women that he cares for. And so entice your husband so that he'll tell us the riddle, or we'll burn you and your father's house with fire. Okay, well, that's just straight out extortion, right? They don't want to have to each of them cough up a change of clothes and a wrap. And so we will burn you out if we have to pay. Have you invited us here to impoverish us? Is this not so? And so that's how much each of these would have cost. Enough that the 30 young guys say, this will impoverish us. Well, imagine if Samson has to do that 30 times over. How much more would he be? Well, they don't care about that, and they don't care about her. And so they threaten his wife. And Samson's wife wept before him and said, you only hate me and do not love me. You have propounded a riddle to the sons of my people and have not told it to me. So he said to her, behold, I have not told it to my father or mother. So should I tell you? So I haven't told anybody. Not my family, not your family, not anybody. However, she wept before him 7 days while the feast lasted. Well, what a way to ruin a wedding, right? Where the bride, under, threat of death to her and her family and impoverishment if they survive, under threat of death and impoverishment, the wife is distraught, and she weeps while she should be feasting and laughing. And so, this is a terrible deal. And so eventually on the seventh day, he told her because she pressed him so hard. Then she told the riddle to the sons of her people. So she's now going to start off with an impoverished husband. If this works out normally, right? She's going to start off with an impoverished husband, but her father and mother and the rest of her family will survive. And so she has sided with her people over her husband. And of course, that also is, that happens again with Samson and Delilah. So when the men of the people said to him on the seventh day before the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey and what is stronger than a lion? And he said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle. And so you found that out by being into my business. You found that out in the wrong way. You have misused my wife against me. And then again, verse 19, as before, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily. So again, the Spirit is mighty on Samson. And he went down to Ashkelon, and he killed 30 of them, and he took their spoil, and he gave the changes of clothes to those who told the riddle. And his anger burned, and he went up to his father's house. And so he leaves town. He kills 30 other Philistines, brings back their clothes. I imagine the condition that those clothes are in. They're not going to be new off the rack, right? They're going going to have whatever tears and blood and condition they're in after the guy who was wearing it last got murdered. He brings the victim's clothes, and he gives them those clothes from their other kinsman from another town, and he goes home. And what an eventful wedding, right? But verse 20, Samson's wife was given to one of his companions who had been his friend. All right, so he went home angry, having killed those 30 and having basically been blackmailed into giving the answer. And he's not in the mood to take his wife home. And so when he doesn't take his wife home, his father-in-law gives his wife to somebody else. And so that's going to be a provocation as well. And it's going to lead to more and more strife. And so, again, we just think about the strength of Samson, of a physical nature, unmatched in history. I mean, the only thing we have like Samson, and we'll have more of it next week, is things like the Greek legend of Hercules, right? Or other kinds of obvious myth and storytelling of super strong men that are based on these characters. It's sometimes said by skeptics that Samson is a literary figure borrowed from Hercules. Actually, it's probably more likely, if anything, that the legends of Hercules is a character based on the real life exploits of Samson. But in any case, here is the provocation. Here is the beginning of the deliverance from the Philistines, and the war of deliverance is just about ready to get really heated up. And so that'll be next time as we continue the story of this sort of anti-Jesus, the great judge Samson.